Okay, so your Chimo greetings. Yet I say everyone for tuning in. Just going to give it a minute for people to jump on. Going to put a link in the chat room. So you can see the publication that we're dealing with. So that is the publication right there. And I'll put that, okay. Okay, so your Chimo greetings. I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Radnehambata Akan Odwirafo of Akwamumain Amaruka Tifimudi Akwamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afurite, Kaiti people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So we want to go into our article series. We have a two-part article series that's part of a larger work dealing with Torah and Quran, which was corrupted into Torah and Quran by the whites and their offspring. But these are phrases that have a deep cosmology within ancient Kamit and Kamit, Nubian Egypt, our ancestral culture. So the information is actually taken from our book, ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology. That's a 600-page book, 8.5 by 11. And you'll see we have 12 of the books I've published. I published 31 books today, but I took 12 of them and compiled them in an anthology, revised and expanded them. So it's a 600-page book, 8.5 by 11 full colors, and encyclopedia size volume. And this is where the information is derived from. And we have these two articles that are, taken from the Kuku Tuntun book within that anthology. So we want to go into detail about that. So we're going to start off with the examination of the term Torah in ancient Kemet, and then we'll go to Quran. Now, and of course, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room. Okay. Let me expand this a little bit. So what you are looking at here is the first plate. And in fact, let me show you this image also. The first plate within the papyrus of Ani from the Runu Pert Imperu, misnomer, the Book of the Dead. And in fact, this particular text, what we're doing, and I'll just take this down for a second and show you this image that we've been sharing recently on social media. And we started our weekly series on this yesterday, Sunday. So every Sunday at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m., we're reading through and we're examining our ancestral texts, the Pert Imperu, which means coming forth by day, misnomer, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but we're examining the text in detail. So the first plate that you just saw, we're going to go back to, comes from this text. So we're examining our texts. These are our ancient texts. They derive from the Meru text, the pyramid texts, that are the oldest religious compositions yet unearthed anywhere in the world. So we have the original quote unquote scriptures or ancestral writings that the whites and their offspring took fragments of, corrupted, and represented to us or represented to us as sacred divine writings like the Bible, Koran, Talmud, Bhagavad Gita, Dhammapadas, and so forth. All of those are fraudulent pseudo scriptures based on their fraudulent pseudo religions, based on their fictional cartoon characters who never existed, including Jesus, Yeshua, Muhammad, Allah, Buddha, Brahman, Yahweh, all these fictional characters who didn't exist of any form or of any race. And we go into detail about that in our book that we're getting into today. So we did the first session of that course yesterday, and you can join us weekly on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. to go through these ancient texts of our ancestral culture. But that first image was from the plate number 1, and part of plate number 2 of the papyrus of Ani, from Ani's book of coming forth by day, misnomer, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and so forth. So that's what the image is. This is the individual Ani who transitioned. He's an ancestral spirit now, And the ritual invocation is this text right here. So, what is the nature of the text? So we show us from plates 1 and 2, this on the left portion, that's part of plate 1, and then plate 2 here. He was a scribe, he transitioned, he died in ancient Kamit about 3,300 years ago. This papyrus was found in his tomb. These are ritual invocations. They're either on papyri or on the tomb walls or coffin texts. They derive from the Meru, the so-called pyramid, but the Meru texts that go back over 4,500 years ago and so forth. Now, there are Runu per Meru, which are the chapters of coming forth by day. And you'll find these are ritual incantations. They were also utilized not just to assist the deceased spirit. We do ritual prayers, ritual incantations. So when someone transitions, their spirit is now an ancestor or ancestress. They come to the funeral. They're hanging around the family members, who they left behind. And when their family members go to sleep or they're going through the course of their day, they get visited by their ancestral spirit. But we engage in ritual as a community to engage in ritual prayer, ritual incantation, ritual chant to assist that spirit to move seamlessly to the community of ancestresses and ancestors. In Samanfo and ancient Kemet, they're called Aku or Akutu, the illuminated ones. So they can dwell in that ancestral community in peace and in equilibrium for the next 150 plus years until it's time for them to reincarnate through their descendants back into the world, back into their clans. If they do not do that, then there's, a chance that they can become an earthbound spirit and they're hanging around the place where they died and causing people problems, hanging around the house that they died in or the hospital or the street and so forth and causing people problems and so forth. So we assist that individual through ritual incantation, ritual chant, ritual prayer, ritual song to elevate them and push them towards, harmoniously to live amongst the ancestral community in balance. But we also utilize these ritual texts for our own spiritual cultivation. So, and that's what we're saying here. So even when you look at part of the incantation, one of the instructions, it says, if one says this chapter, so you have the whole chapter laid out in the language, and then it says, if one says this chapter while pure, it means going forth by day after he has been buried, and the assumption of which of his forms he desires. Now, as to anyone over him, this incantation is recited. It means being prosperous upon earth. He shall emerge from every fire. Nothing evil shall encircle him. A matter 1,000,000 times true. So not only assisting the ancestor or ancestress to live in harmony in the ancestral realm, but also when we deal with our own spiritual cultivation, it's a form of spiritual immunity when we engage in ritual practice to repel anything negative so we can move through our life in a harmonious way. So that's the purpose of the text for the deceased, but also for us as well, the living as well. Now, this is a form of the divinity, the creator of the universe, which is Ra, and then the creatress of the universe is Ra'et. So the creator and creatress is Ra and Ra'et. And let me show you an image from our book so you can see an image of them together, side by side. And this image isn't in this particular article, but it's in our 600-page book. Now, so this is from our book, and just so you can see an image that very, very often people haven't seen before. They hear about Ra, the creator of the universe, misnomer at the sun god, but he's not the sun god, but they very often don't hear about the female counterpart and balance, the creatress of the universe. So this is Ra and Ra'et. And I took these images when I was in Kamit in Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings and so forth, where the image of Ra is from, one of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. And in the temple of Apet Asetiu, which is so-called Karnak, in the temple of Kainsu, you'll find this great image of Ra'et, the creatress. So that is Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. And they have various names in various Afurakani cultures. In Akan is in Yonkumpon and in Yonkunton, the creator and creatress. In Yoruba, that is Odumare and Oshumare. In Eve, in Vodun, that's Da and Ida Huedo. So everybody has a name for them. We know who we are dealing with. Okay, so let's go back to the other text. Okay, so this is a form of Ra when he's sitting in his boat, the solar boat. So you look at the boat of the sun, they talk about the solar disk, the Aten. Atenit is the term for sun, masculine and feminine. Aten, the sun god. Atenit, the sun goddess. And Ra and Ra'et will possess the sun goddess and so forth, operate within that solar orb and use that solar orb to transmit their spiritual energy. So Ra, just like spirit possession, when the spirit possesses us and gets in the body and so forth during ritual, Ra and Ra possess the sun and use the sun to transmit their energy. So they'll show the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, but they'll show it in the context of being in a bark, a boat, and this disk of the sun, and Ra sitting in the boat of the sun and so forth, and he's sailing across the sky from sun up to sundown, from the horizon to horizon, eastern to western, and so forth. Here you see Ra in the form of a falcon-headed divinity in the boat of the Aten, Atenit, the sun. Now, the beginning of the day is sunrise, and thus we see Ra rising in his boat of the Aten to inaugurate a new day cycle. Each day that we rise, thus begins with the worship of Ra, sun salutation, or ritual invocation of Ra. So when the sun rises and so forth, you'll even see in Kamit, you'll see the baboons go out and they put their hands up, rub their hands in the water, put their hands up in the sun, and it warms their hands, and they begin to make their chattering sounds and so forth. So they're literally doing sun salutations in that context. But if you look at the terms, you see toi, to do something in the morning. And the round circle with the dot in the middle is this solar disk and so forth. So toi, to do something in the morning. Toi, the morning, tomorrow morning, and so forth. Also, dua, to call, to cry out. And if you look at the determinative symbol, you see the man's arms up here or the hand up and so forth. It's a ritual invocation. So toi meaning morning, toi to call or cry out, ritual calling. Now, you also have toi, to praise, to adore, to honor. And you see the man's hands up here. That's a ritual provocation. That's a ritual invocation and so forth. And then toi, praise, a hymn of praise, plural, dwa, u, dwau. The u makes it plural, just like the s in English makes something plural, like boat and boats. In Kemet, the u or the u sound makes something plural. So toi means to praise, honor, adore, ritual invocation. Twau means praises, praisers, written hymns of praise, and so forth. And then, of course, this is the spelling, different variations of the spelling of the name Ra. The circle with the dot in the middle is the sun itself. And since he operates through the sun, that's one of the ways to spell Ra. They show the falcon on the standard, which represents, that means it's a deity. Sometimes they spell it with the open mouth symbol, which is the R, the forearm with the open palm here, which is the A sound, so that's RA. And then the circle with the dot in the middle, that is the solar disk. And then once again, the falcon on the standard, that means that this term RA doesn't just say Ra, but if you have the falcon on the standard next to it, the determinative, that means this Ra, R-A, means a deity. Another spelling of that, then you have another variation, the solar disk, the symbol for the R, the open mouth, which is that, the sound, forearm with the open palm, and the symbol of the axe, which also represents deity, Nsoro. Or you can have the seated, shrouded figure. You see the seated, shrouded, bearded figure, as you can see here. That means that's a determinative symbol representing that this term right here, followed by this seated, shrouded figure, means this is a deity. You also have the couchant lion, which is the R sound, because lions make the R or the roaring sound, so that's an R, R. The forearm with the open palm, which is this, that's the A sound, and the solar disk, showing that this is Ra. So different spellings of the name Ra. And so you see the actual text in the papyrus. This is the man with his two arms like this. TUA, the worship. And then you see the seated figure with the beard and the solar disk with the dot in the middle. That's one of the spellings of Ra. So what you have here is TUA Ra, the worship of Ra. So that's from the papyrus of Ani. That was the individual whose name was Ani. He was a scribe, he died, and so forth. That papyrus was in his tomb. Now, here's a way, someone drew out the same thing and put it in a horizontal form and so forth. But you see right here, the TUA, the worship of Ra, Keft, Ubenef, Aket, Aptet, Pet. Keft, when he rises, Uben means to rise from the Aket, which is the horizon. Aptet is eastern, just like Amentet is western. Aptet is eastern. Met is northern, and Resit is southern, but rises from the horizon, Aket, Aptet, eastern, Pet, sky. So when the sun rises in the eastern sky, we engage in TUA Ra, or ritual invocation of the divinity Ra. So that was from the papyrus of the individual whose name was Ani. And you saw him and his wife in the original image. This is Ani standing here, and he's engaged in the ritual provocation, the TUA Ra. And this is the solar disk, so it's showing that he's doing that ritual invocation. This is his wife here, but he's the individual who was the scribe who transitioned. But now we get to another text from a different person. There was a royal scribe, his name was Nakht. He lived about 3,500 years ago. And this, in his papyrus, once again, is the TUA Ra, the worship of Ra. From the royal scribe, you see the image here of the palette and the stylus of the scribe. So they have their little pen, the palette with the paint on it, and they put the pen in the paint, and then they scribe and so forth. This is the palette with the little places for the paint. This is the ink jar or paint jar, and this is the stylus, the pen, and so forth. So he's a scribe. So it's TUA Ra, the worship of Ra, of the scribe, of the royal soldiers, Menfitu Nakht. So he was a scribe of and overseer of the soldiers. Ani was just a scribe, but Nakht, he was a royal scribe and an overseer of the soldiers. So in his papyrus that was found in his tomb, this is the TUA Ra of the individual Nakht transition, where the other text was the TUA Ra of Ani. So the basic title, and you find this, anybody who transitioned in Kamit and they had these burials, they would place the papyrus, the ritual invocations on these scrolls, which are actually books and so forth, within the tomb and so forth, sometimes painted on the walls of the tomb itself, sometimes within the coffin. They call them the coffin texts and so forth. They're derived from the Meru, the pyramid text, same cosmology. And you will find this Torah text with every single person who transitioned. And if people were not very wealthy and they couldn't build big tombs and so forth and have, a bunch of artisans making sculptures for them, and they were someone of, lesser means, the people would still come out. Their family members would come out when they had the funeral and the burial. They would bury the person. It wouldn't be ornate. They would engage in the ritual prayers. They would engage in the Torah and so forth, to propel that spirit. So that's a common piece. You see in the papyrus of Ani, the papyrus of Necht, but this is an actual image of the individual engaged in that, and you'll see that all over Kamit, that ritual posture. So when we're talking about that ritual posture, we're talking about ritual provocation. When you push energy, just like if you pushed an individual and they responded by, their energy is responding back to you, you elicit a response by pushing their energy and provoking them to release some energy towards you. In the same fashion, when someone is engaged in martial arts, they learn how to push some chi energy, and chi is actually a title of Ra in Kemet, and Chit is a title of Ra'et in Kemet, and so forth. So chi or ki, same thing in the Fang tradition in Gabon. Amongst the Fang people, F-A-N-G, the term ki means life force energy. Same thing in Kemet. That's where the Asians got it from. And we have that in our book as well. But when you push that energy out, it's a ritual provocation because it pushes the individual and it causes them to respond and dispense energy towards you. And we have these same ritual movements in the Akan tradition, in Ghana and Ivory Coast, and in the Hoodoo tradition. We talk about laying hands and so forth and projecting energy towards the individual to heal something. This is what we're talking about. So you're ritually and literally provoking the energy of the Ntoro, the god or goddess. That ritual movement continues to be used today. So laying hands, all of that is literally projecting, shooting, releasing. And then once the person gets hit with it, then they respond by projecting energy towards you. Now, we do this on a regular basis. That's no different than if you have, energy-wise, if you have two magnets on the table and you put one near it and they repel and so forth, it's literally a projection or pushing of energy, pushing it outward. Now, so we're talking about to touch, to push, to provoke. That's toi. We say this is why the term toi also means to cry out, to call, because sound vibrations are matrices of energy that are projected. One can sing at such a pitch or volume that the sound vibrations can break a glass. That's releasing, shooting, sending out of energetic vibrations. Those sound vibrations project out. They move across space. They hit a target and so forth, cause the glass to break. Or, as we always say, if a child is an infant, cries out when they wake up, the sound vibrations move through space. They hit the eardrums of the mother, and then she responds by going to the child and dispensing that life-giving and immunizing milk. So that's a ritual call, a ritual provocation, sound vibrations, energy moving through space that affect another individual, an entity, and then the response is to come and dispense something, a substance that's going to nourish and regenerate and heal the individual. That's what we do when we provoke, ritually provoke, but it's also projecting our energy through the spirit forcing creation, and they respond by dispensing life force energy to us. So that's shooting out, projecting this energy. The terms toi and twau related to the morning and doing something in the morning, referencing the invocation of Ra and Ra'at as soon as we rise. This was a practice in ancient Kemet and continues to be our practice today in the Hoodoo tradition as well, getting up in the morning, ritually provoking the energy of the Aten, Atenita, the sun. We never stop doing that. So first thing we do is cleanse ourselves, go directly to the family shrines to invoke the Abosom and Nsamanfo. These are Akan terms for deities and ancestral spirits. So you get up in the morning, you cleanse yourself, you go to the family shrines first, you do a ritual invocation, and then you go about your day. You don't just get up and get dressed and then leave the house, or get up and get dressed and eat some food and leave. You get up, you cleanse yourself, you go to the family shrines for ritual invocation, TUA, ritual provocation of the Abosom, the forces of nature, the deities, and the Nsamanfo, ancestral spirits, and then you go eat some food, and then you go do what you do. So we do that every day, children and adults. So every morning we engage, every morning, which is TUA, we engage in the ritual of TUA, the TUA Ra, as well as TUA Ra'et. That's a living culture. We do it every day. Now, the whites and their offspring learned about the TUA Ra. They saw our writings. They repeated that. They learned about the deities and so forth. And then when the Greeks invaded, they started creating sculptures of the deities like Ra and Osar and everything else, and started making them white and corrupting the cosmology and everything else. Now, the whites who invaded and settled Kamit heard the invocation TUA Ra and observed this ritual practice within our community every single day. Some of them would, of course, begin to imitate our ritual practices, but they really cannot do that because the deities do not communicate with them or possess them. So it's just empty ritual and empty imitation, but they still did that anyway. They learned our language, copied our writing system. The Greeks started writing in hieroglyphs and so forth, learned from our people, corrupting the cosmology and so forth. They were there for centuries. Then the Assyrians came, the Persians came, the Greeks came, the Romans came, then the Arabs and so forth. Now, so when you see the little hand with the open palm, that's the D sound. So TUA can be spelled with the T sound with the loaf of bread, ta, or the D sound, da. So it's da and wa. So when you see this rope with the lasso, and then the symbol of this bird here, that's the U and A together is wa, wa. Now in ancient Kemet, there was no letter O. Whenever a foreign word is translated that has an O, like Cleopatra and so forth, they would have to transliterate it with this, the lasso with the rope and the A sound, which is wa, wa. So, but that is the O translated from foreign words. So whether you spell it with the T, TUA, or the D sound with the palm, dua, same thing. To praise, to address, to make a report, to honor, praisings, honorings, and so forth, the morning, all of that. So with the T, TUA, to pray and praise, as well as morning. So we have dua and TUA, both meaning ritual prayer invocation, and morning sunrise, and all of that, key to understanding. In the Coptic dialect, the late period dialect of the language of ancient Kemet, TUA, the UA, as we said, when you look in the Coptic dialect, that's the dialect of the language that came into use about 2,000 years ago at the end of the dynastic period. You see in Coptic, it's spelled T-O-O-U-I, Toi. So the UA is transliterated as an O, TUA, TUA. And then when the Greeks came, they continued that practice of transliterating the UA to the O, just like they found in the Coptic dialect. So TUA became To. Now, we say the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Old Testament of the Bible, are not holy writings. They are not divinely inspired. In the language of Kemet, the term TUA means worship. TUA Ra means the worship of Ra. This is a title of many compositions written in Kemet by Afurakanu Afraikaitnu for thousands of years. Black people, Afurakani people. TUA Ra, the worship of Ra, was corrupted by the whites into Torah and used as a title for a series of plagiarisms and perversions describing the whites' false philosophy and worship of their fictional god. Now, we also mentioned, we'll get into this in a minute, that Kura is the corruption of the term. It was corrupted by the whites and their offspring into Koran and so forth. We'll get into that in a minute. So TUA means the worship of Ra. We can see the major religions, they've corrupted all of these various things. When you look at the papers of Ra, the term papyrus is the origin of the term papers. But when you look at the term papyrus, it comes from papyrus. It's also written papyrus or biblos or biblos and so forth. So let's look at that real quick. Just to give you a quick little rundown. And you can look in any etymological dictionaries and so forth and find this information. Biblos is an ancient Greek term for the inner bark of the papyrus plant, used to make writing material, which became a metonym for a book or scroll. The word is directly derived from the Phoenician port city Byblos, major hub for importing Egyptian papyrus. Etymology, the word biblos referred to the material, where biblion is the diminutive. So when you have bibliography and so forth, it's talking about book. But later, connection to Bible, the English word Bible is derived from the Greek ta biblia, the books. But it's talking about, in ancient Greek literature, the biblos referred to the pipros. The pipros became biblos, but it's originally pipros. Biblos referred to the papyrus reed itself and later the scrolls written upon it. So that's important because the term papyrus and papyrus became peplus and biblos and so forth. Hold on, let me remove that. All right. So when you go and you look up these etymological terms, you can find that very easily. And the reason why that's important is because the papers of papyrus of Ra, the illumination of Ra, the worship of Ra, in Greek, they corrupted the name Ra and they started calling him Helios. Just like they corrupted Osar into Osiris, Oset into Isis, Heru into Herus or Horus or Horus. They corrupted Ptah into Hephaestos. They corrupted Ra into Helios. And Helios is the name for the sun in Greek. So they thought Ra was the sun god and they started calling him Helios. So the Helios Biblos are the Helios Pipros or the Helios Papyrus. It's the book or the papyrus of Biblos or Pipros or papers of Helios, meaning the book or the papers of Ra. The term Holy Bible comes from Helios Biblos, meaning the Biblos or Pipros or papyrus or papers, Pipros of Helios of Ra. So even the Bible itself, Helios Biblos, is the Biblos of the book, Biblos, papers of the god Helios or Ra. Then you have Torah is TUA, Ra, the adoration of Ra. And as we're going to see in a minute, Ku, Ra, the wisdom or illumination of Ra, was corrupted into Koran. So the Bible, Helios Biblos, the book of Ra, Torah, the worship of Ra, Kura, the wisdom or illumination of Ra, they simply stole our titles. Now, they'll give you the etymology of the name Torah. They'll say the forms Yara, officially unrelated, but their basic mechanisms appear to overlap somewhat, both reflect an exchange of energy from a higher dispensing level to a lower receiving level. Then they say it appears that the form Yara mostly describes the sending of energy, either the exchange viewed from the perspective of the dispensing side, releasing, or else the shock-free absorption of the energy on the receiving side. The form Yar appears to deal mostly with the receiving of energy and all of that. Note that one of the two verbs, yara, is a bi form of yara. Also note the similarity between these terms. So let's look at this. The verb yara means to throw, cast, or shoot. It's used when arrows are shot, stones are stacked, and so forth. So throwing, casting, or shooting, or projecting. The root yada, to throw, cast, shoot, project, is a descriptive remnant of our terms. Let's look a little bit further. The man here is literally projecting or throwing, casting his energy to Ra to provoke a response. So a dispensation of energy will come forward from the deity. Now we have another person talking about the etymology of the Hebrew word Torah. Let's start by looking at the etymology. The word Torah comes from the Hebrew word yada, a verb which means to flow or throw something. This can be a flowing of an arrow from an archer's bow, or the flowing of a finger to point out a direction. Nouns are derived from the verb by making one or two changes to the verb root and so forth, so they go into detail about that. So we say, notice here that the author states that the root verb yada means to flow or throw something. Most importantly, this can be a flowing of an arrow from an archer's bow or the flowing of a finger to point out a direction. What is missing is the cosmological context. So we're talking about flowing out, projecting, pointing, pushing out, and so forth. That's what we're looking at. We looked at the D sound, which is the hand with the open palm turned upwards. That has more than one pronunciation in our ancestral language of Kamit, as well as in the Akan languages derived from Kamit as well. For example, the term Abdu, which is today they corrupt that title, the sacred city is Abydos or Abydos in Greek, but it's Abdu in ancient Kemet. It's also pronounced Abju in Kemet. The D becomes a J, J, just like the D sounds like the DG in judge, J, and so forth. So Abdu becomes Abju. The sacred pure mountain in the region of Napata, which is in ancient Kanit or Nubia, is called Wabdu, and it's written with the Wabdu, but it's also pronounced Wabju, Ju. So we have the same thing in the Akan language. The word for iron is da-de, da-de. That's amongst the Asante Akan people, but amongst the Fanti, they don't say da-de, they say da-je, da-je. It's a softer D, which becomes a za, za, ja. So, same thing with Fanti and Fanse. If you look at the name of the deity of divine wisdom, Tahuti, you will see his name also written Jahuti. The T, ta, becomes ja, ja, Jahuti, Jahuti. So, when they saw that the T or the D, ta or da, can also be pronounced ja, ja. So Torah or Tua, Ra becomes Jua, Ra, Jara, Jara, Jara. This is where they get Yara and later Jora being the root and Torah being the name and so forth. When they say Yara, Yara is the root that comes from Tua, Ra, which is Jora, Jora. They stole it directly from our language, the way we enunciate the terms, the difference between the da and the ja, ja. So that's ja, ra. This is where they get Yahra from Torah. So when they're making up these things, they say, well, it seems like it means flowing or projecting or shooting or projecting an arrow and so forth, but it's also the name of the book that we talk about the worship of their fictional deity. Now, we also have the term tu, which is root tua. That's literally the word for the number 5. And you see the little star, the 5-pointed star. To do something in the morning, praisings and honorings and so forth. So when you talk about the 5 books of the Torah, the Pentateuch, or the 5 books and so forth, the word Torah means the worship of Ra. That's the worship of the divinity. It means ritual provocation, praisings, glorifications. Torah, TUA also means 5. It's also representative of the term, the pronunciation ta with dwa becomes jwa, 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 ra, and so forth. So when they talk about, it probably means this because it's associated with projection and shooting and teaching, and it ascribes to the laws of what's happening with the fictional deity in the 5 books of quote unquote Moses and so forth. They don't know the origins. They know these sounds Torah and Yora or Yara. They know that has something to do with 5. They know it has something to do with ritual praises and glorifications and the worship of the divinity. They know it has something to do with projection. They know what those sounds mean. Why doesn't Kiki mean projecting and the worship of a divinity and the number 5? Why is it Torah? They know that's what the meaning is. They don't know how come Kiki doesn't mean 5 and also worship and also projection. They don't know the cosmology. If they heard us saying it, Torah, and writing it, Torah, and that Yara, and so forth, they knew what the definitions were. They kept the definitions, but they can't tell you why it means these things. If you don't have the cosmological context, you don't know why. And let's look at this other piece real quick. In our book, in the Kuku Tuntum, let's go to page 31 right quick. Show you this image right here, just to give you some context. So you see this divinity, and he has his hands projected like this. This is common practice, ritual practice of deities and people in ancient Kamit. So you see that, and you see him with the sacred headdress and so forth. Let's go down a little bit. You can give you a better image. In fact, I'll show you an image of the deity Al-Sar, Awusi. Okay. So this right here is Al-Sar set in Heru. And you see he has on the Atef crown, which is the tall white crown in the middle, and then the 2 feathers on the side. And so you see that. Hold on a second. All right. So you see that tall white crown and so forth, and that's common. You see that Heru has a combination of the red crown and the white crown in the middle and so forth. So that's common. You see that with Atem, you see that with Mut, you see these various divinities wearing that crown. So we go back to the deity involved in the ritual provocation. Okay, hold on 1 second. It's taking a minute to. Okay. So you see him wearing the same crown with the feathers on the side. He's doing the ritual provocation. Only difference is, as you can see here on the bottom, that's the Canaanite god El. So when you see through the Bible, El and El Gabal, the old man of the mountain and so forth, and they try to conflate him with the fictional character Yahweh and so forth, this is the god El from ancient Canaan, so-called Canaan, which is later called Israel and so forth. So you have to ask yourself a question. Why is the ancient Canaanite god El in the exact same posture and wearing the same crown as the deities from ancient Kamit. Because our people migrated from northern Africa into Kanana, which is the ancient title, later called, corrupted into Canaan, later Israel and so forth, but ancient Kanana was a colony of Kamit people, Nubian people who migrated from Kemet, settled the area, and continued the same ancestral religion. The great divinity El Gabal, old man of the mountain and so forth, that is actually a form of Ra. And then you have Elat, which is Ra'ed and so forth. So, but he's engaged in the ritual provocation, the Torah ritual provocation and so forth. They took El, corrupted into the fake Hebrew deity, and then as we will see, and let's just show this a little bit. But we're not going to get into the whole thing at the moment. Let me go back up. I just want you to see this image of the deity Yah and Yao. And this is where they get the fictional character Yahweh from. The term Yah means the moon. This is the moon deity, Yah, also spelled Yao. As you can see, Yao with the W, Yao, Yahweh, and so forth. In Coptic, it becomes Yo or Yah and Yahweh. That's the divinity Yah or Yahweh, which they corrupted into Yahweh. Originally a moon divinity, there's also Yahweh, which is the female moon divinity. So we have a male moon divinity, Yahweh, or Yah, actually Yao and Yahweh, and the female moon divinity, Yahweh, and so forth. Just like you have the sun, Aten, and female sun divinity, Atenit. We have Ra and Ra'ed, Amen and Amenet, and so forth, Asar and Aset. We also get into how Tuhuti is called Ma'al, Sher, true of word, true of speech, and so forth, and his assistant, the baboon, Aran, proffering the Eye of Heru, a divinatory instrument, and Ma'al, Sher, and Anan becomes Moshe and Aran, or Moses and Aaron, and so forth. All of the characters in the Bible are fictional, fraudulent, cartoon characters who never existed of any form, of any race. They took the names and functions of actual deities from Kemet, corrupted them, corrupted the cosmology, and then put these fake characters in Palestine and other places and pretending like they were real characters who were, that their blood related to. The Hebrews never existed. We go into detail about that as well. So I just want to touch on this information. Let me go back real quick. We're going to do a part 2. We'll probably do that later today. So that was the Torah portion. In the part 2, we'll get into how Kura is was corrupted into Quran. We have to talk about the deity Tuhuti, the divinity of divine wisdom that they corrupted into Jibril or Gabriel in Islam and so forth. The deity Mu, Hap, Met, the waters Mu of Hap, Met, the northern Nile. So the spiritual force, the deity, the god of the northern Nile is Hap, Met. Met means north. Hap is the name of the deity. Hapi of the north is Hapmet. And when he operates through the waters, Mu of Hapmet, the northern Nile, Muhammad becomes Muhammad. So the spiritual force operating through the northern Nile is Muhammad. That's deity was corrupted into the fictional deity or character Muhammad. And so we get into this whole notion of how the relationship between Ra and Tahuti and Muhammad, and how this notion of Aku Ra, which is a title of Ra, as a matter of fact, the illuminated one, Aku, illumination or wisdom. This is why the Quran is called the Book of Wisdom, but it's a corruption of Aku Ra. So, but we'll get into that into part 2 of this. We just wanted to do part 1 right now. So, you can get this information. We have our 600-page book, 8.5 by 11, ODWIRASEM, Trustorical Anthology, full color. On the back, you see the 12 books that comprise this volume. So I published 31 books today, but I took 12 of them that deal with Trustorical, cosmology, language, and so forth, put them all together in this new volume, 600 pages. You can order it from here. Since you're subscribers, you can get the 30% discount. And you can, if you use Afterpay at checkout, you can split the payment up into 4 payments of $13. So today you would only have to pay $13 to place your order. So you go to the site now, you go to that site, you'll see the ODWIRASEM book, you'll see the book cover. If you choose Afterpay at checkout, you already get the automatic 30% discount, but you choose Afterpay at checkout, you get the option to split your payment up and you only have to pay $13 now and you can place your order. And then the other 3 $13 payments are paid every other week for the next month and a half to 2 months. So you can take your time paying that, but you can order the book now. And in the book, we talk about the origin of fictional character Muhammad, Allah, Buddha, Brahman, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Moses, David, all of these fictional characters, and many more. That's just in one of the books. We talk about Ankh, the origin of the term yoga, Kara, the origin of the term chakra in ancient Kamit. So many different things we talk about in this 600-page volume, so you can access that now. We're going to do the part 2 on Kura, the origin of the term Koran, later on. So, okay, so Yerase, we thank everybody for tuning in, and Yebeshabio, we will meet again. That's it.